Hi everyone, it's Katrina. The places I'm going to show you today are not places that many people have heard of before, and some have never even been found. I'll be exploring a mysterious base in Antarctica, the lost Atlantis of the North, and ancient Romans in South America. Are you ready for it? Let's go! Antarctica's secret cave base. On a remote island in Antarctica, there is a tunnel leading to an unknown subterranean something. Nobody knows where the tunnel leads because its entrance was spotted on Google Earth. Some think it is a portal to Hollow Earth. The Hollow Earth isn't a real place. It's a theory that there is another world buried underneath the planet's crust. It's this secret realm where King Kong lives, if the movies are to be believed. While King Kong is only a character in a movie, the myth of the Hollow Earth is very real. People have believed in the existence of a hidden world underneath our own for centuries. The interior world supposedly has its own light source, its own giant creatures, and maybe even its own civilization. Rumor has it the only way to reach this unseen place is through portals, physical gateways in either Antarctica or the Arctic. Another option is that the mysterious hole is the entrance to a secret military base, either human or alien. It's possible the government has installed a base at the bottom of the world that they aren't telling us about. It wouldn't be the first time the government has done something sneaky. On the other hand, the gaping hole in the ice could have been made by extraterrestrials. One thing that makes it so strange is that shortly after it was discovered on Google Earth, it was gone. Somebody spotted the hole and documented what they found. 6 months later, the hole was sealed as if it had never been there at all. This doesn't seem like something the entranceway to a cave would do. It feels like something an opening to a base would do. Looking at the images from Google Earth, the opening was roughly 74 feet high and 250 feet wide. Just about any known aircraft or spaceship would be able to fit through the gap. Another possibility, just as likely as the others, is that the entrance led into the ruins of an ancient city buried beneath the ice. In front of the hole were what looked like stairs. There appeared to be a humongous staircase partially revealed by the thawing ice going straight into the hole. Maybe it's only my imagination, but the images appear to show a grand staircase leading through a gateway. What do you think is hiding beneath the Antarctic ice? And when will somebody finally go down there and check it out for us? The amazing Atlantis of the North. Many have tried to find the lost Atlantis of the North, but none have ever succeeded. This is the incredible and shocking tale of the Golden City of Vineta, a place few have ever even heard of. Have you? The tale takes us to the 12th century, when Vineta was a gorgeous city situated on the Baltic coast. The people were rich, the buildings were tall and covered in gold, and the weather always seemed perfect. Everybody was happy until disaster struck. Just like the legendary Atlantis, Vineta disappeared beneath the waves. The inhabitants had supposedly been warned of an incoming disaster, but thought themselves above such trivial matters. They were boastful, arrogant, and refused to believe the city could sink. In that regard, they were just like the Atlanteans. The people of Atlantis were destroyed by their own hubris as well. When Vineta really did sink, they all had Pikachu faces before plunging into the cold depths of the sea. That's the legend, but what about the reality? No physical proof has been found of Vineta, but that doesn't mean much considering it's supposed to be underwater. There are legends from all across Europe that attest to its existence. Traders from the Mediterranean, Spain, the Viking lands, and the Slavic territories supposedly went to Vineta to peddle their wares. Vineta was one of the most important ancient commercial cities in Europe. Some merchants even wrote their personal accounts of visiting the city. Like, for example, Ibrahim ibn Yaqub, a Sephardi Jewish traveler from the 10th century. He described Vineta as a large city by the ocean with 12 magnificent gates. He said it was the most splendid city he had ever seen. There were about 50,000 people in Vineta, making it nearly as big and prosperous as Constantinople. There are a few different theories on where the ruins of this lavish sunken city might be. Some researchers believe Vineta once stood on Wolin, a small island in the Baltic Sea. Archaeological excavations on Wolin revealed the ruins of a Viking trading post, so perhaps the post was part of the city. Another possible explanation is that Vineta was on Sunshine Island, located between Germany and Poland. Or perhaps it was the lagoon town of Barth in northeastern Germany. Nobody has found the remains of Vineta, but that's the fun of the mystery. The truth of the golden Atlantis of the North remains a secret. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Curtis Head for the generous super thanks. It really means a lot. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The biblical city of Ai. A team of archaeologists recently announced the discovery of a biblical city mentioned in the Old Testament. Other than a few biblical scholars, most scientists didn't think the city of Ai was even real. The discovery took almost 2 decades to make. It was only possible thanks to the dedication of Dr. Scott Stripling and his team of researchers from the Associates for Biblical Research. They were determined to uncover the legendary Canaanite stronghold spoken of in the book of Joshua. Let's check what the Bible has to say before I take you to the archaeological site. In the book of Genesis, Ai appears as the place where Abraham camped during his journey toward the Promised Land. God said to him, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you." When Abraham arrived at the place God said, he built an altar. Ai appears again in the book of Joshua as a Canaanite city 2 miles from Bethel. It was in Ai where the Israelites suffered a brutal defeat at the hands of their enemies. The Israelites had been told to keep nothing for themselves when they passed through the wicked city of Jericho. But Achan disobeyed God by keeping 200 shekels of silver and a gold bar. Achan had stolen spoils of war against the Lord's orders. For Achan's egregious sin, God allowed the Israelites to be utterly destroyed by the Canaanites at Ai during an ambush. They would later seek vengeance and smash the city, making it the second Canaanite city taken during Israel's conquest of the Promised Land. Up until now, there had never been any evidence to say Ai was real. To be honest, there was no evidence to say anything in the story I just told you actually happened. Now, Scott Stripling says his team has found Ai's ruins in Khirbet el Makatir. Scott didn't give any specifics, and he didn't mention any artifacts, inscriptions, or buildings to prove the Israelites were ambushed in these particular ruins. Instead, Scott said he found indicators, proving the mystery ruins confirm that the Bible is a real factual book. I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but Scott might be jumping to conclusions. He did discover ancient ruins from the time of the Old Testament. The ruins do seem to fit with the story of Ai from the book of Joshua. But without inscriptions or artifacts, there is no real way of telling which ancient city this actually was. Biblical archaeologists are probably always going to see things through that lens. But what do you think? Stalin's underground printing house. There is a secret room in the city of Tbilisi, Georgia, with a dark Soviet past. Preserved almost perfectly, looking just the same as it did 120 years ago, is Stalin's underground printing house. The underground printing house is hidden beneath a nondescript building in the capital, connected to the surface by a series of tunnels that were occupied by young communists at the beginning of the 20th century. In 1900, Georgia was part of the Russian Empire. The Soviet Union didn't exist yet. Russia hadn't yet been gripped by the rise of communism, but the communist clock was indeed ticking. It was here in Tbilisi where a young man by the name of Yosef Jugashvili initiated an intense propaganda campaign. In this secret subterranean room, Yosef put together a printing press piece by piece. Each piece was smuggled into the country by a network of Bolshevik supporters. This is such a small, secret place, but the history behind the underground room is enormous. To understand what Yosef was doing down in the dark with his printing press, I need to dive into some complex Russian history. I'll start in 1890, when the population of cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg exploded. Major Russian cities found themselves overcrowded, with the majority of people living in destitute conditions. The Industrial Revolution had only just arrived, way after it had arrived in Western Europe and the United States. There was a new class of industrial workers rising in Russia. There was also a famine from 1891 to 92 that killed around 400,000 people. Then, in 1904, Russia and Japan went to war, and Russia was humiliated. The Russian army was beaten, and it wasn't even a contest. This left the Russian Empire demoralized and the people genuinely angry at Tsar Nicholas II. The Bloody Sunday Massacre of 1905 also didn't help much, the Tsar's troops murdering hundreds of unarmed protesters. While all this was going on, Yosef was secretly printing magazines, pamphlets, and newspapers calling for resistance against Russian nobility. He worked out of his covert printing press for 3 years, printing thousands of propaganda pamphlets in a variety of languages. Although his name was originally Yosef, history remembers him as Joseph Stalin. The young man cranking out propaganda newsletters would come to rule communist Russia. 31 years after his secret room was discovered in 1906, Stalin consolidated power and took over the USSR. His pamphlets had helped spark the Russian Revolution of 1917. The famine, the defeat by the Japanese, the bloody massacre, all these things helped remove centuries of imperial rule and establish the new communist regime. One of the first things that Stalin did when he took power was turn his secret printing press into a museum. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, the museum was abandoned. Today, it's maintained by the Communist Party of Georgia. Weirdly enough, it's most popular with Chinese tourists these days. The hunt for the 7 cities of gold. The 7 cities of gold still haven't been found, even though people have been looking for them since the 16th century. Did they ever truly exist, or were the cities made up to trick greedy Spanish explorers? In 1527, survivors of a disastrous Spanish expedition returned with news of a mythical land overflowing with gold in North America. It was like El Dorado, only way more north. Only 4 men had come back from the fateful Narvaez expedition to explore Florida and establish settlements, including the explorer Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. They insisted that somewhere far beyond the lands of the Aztecs were cities paved in gold. The survivors told such a compelling tale that a new group of conquistadors began plotting a mission north. How could they not, with the allure of gold right in front of them? The mission was to be led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. He was the governor of New Galicia, part of New Spain, which today, of course, is Mexico. Francisco and his fellow Spaniards were so crazy for gold that they risked everything to find these legendary 7 cities. They took about 300 mounted soldiers and 60 soldiers on foot. They also brought along 800 indigenous locals and slaves, and an enormous supply of cattle for beef. Even though it all sounds good and planned out, the following 2 years would be disastrous. From Mexico, the group traveled northward into the Texas Panhandle. They found no gold there and no shining cities. The party continued into Arizona and New Mexico, but they found no gold there either. Then, in July 1541, more than a year after they set off, the conquistadors reached Quivira. This was a town of Wichita Native Americans that was most likely near modern Wichita in Kansas. Its exact location is a secret, since nobody has ever found its ruins. Here, Francisco found no wealth. In fact, he found the opposite of wealth. The houses in the city were made of grass. There were no huge stone temples like what the Spanish had seen in Mexico and South America. There wasn't any gold either. Nothing but simple native farmers living a quiet, peaceful existence. Francisco was so angry that he ordered the execution of a Pawnee Indian captive named El Turco. El Turco had been a trusted captive. He was the man who insisted he knew where the 7 cities could be found. El Turco claimed he had seen the people of the great cities eating from golden plates and silver bowls. He said that if the Spanish would only follow him north, they would find riches beyond their wildest imaginations. Francisco realized it was all lies when they got to Kansas, so he had El Turco killed. So what is a conquistador to do when he spent almost 18 months searching for cities that likely never existed in the first place? Francisco turned around and went back to Mexico, but not before destroying communities, robbing food supplies, and leaving a trail of blood in his wake. Could the 7 cities of gold have ever existed? Do you think there were such rich places in North America in ancient times, or did somebody just play a really serious prank on the Spanish invaders? The Sunken Church of Inishere. Why is it that every place in Ireland sounds like it belongs in a fairy tale? For example, the Sunken Church of Inishere in the Aran Islands, just off the coast of the Irish mainland. It sounds like a location in Lord of the Rings. Inishere is on the smallest of the Aran Islands. The island has beautiful sand beaches, unique plants you won't find anywhere else, and a staggering number of ancient ruins. Considering the island is hardly a square mile, the archaeological sites are practically standing on top of each other. What was it that made this remote Irish island so popular in ancient times? The island even has its own patron saint, Saint Kavin. There is hardly anything known about the saint other than that he landed on the island more than 1,000 years ago and established a monastic community. He lived a life of quiet peace, devoted only to God and eternal solitude. Saint Kavin died around the year 865. His body was buried inside a stone tomb on the eastern edge of Inishere. More than 100 years later, in the 10th century, a church was built atop his tomb. This is the Sunken Church of Inishere, also called St. Kavin's Church. You won't find very many people visiting the church for Sunday service. First, because there's no one around, and second, because the church is sort of sunken. Scientists think that over the last 1,000 years, strong gusts of wind and shifting sand have buried the Sunken Church of Inishere. The church didn't technically sink. Rather, the sand piled around it so high as to make it seem as if it is beneath ground level. The church is definitely weird, but it's also a seriously cool secret place to visit if you ever get the chance. You might have the whole island to yourself. There are other reasons to visit the Aran Islands. You can see O'Brien's Castle, an ancient lighthouse, and a megalithic mound that dates back to 1500 BC. The legendary City of Caesars. The 7 cities of gold were said to be somewhere between Arizona and Kansas. El Dorado was supposed to be in Colombia. The lost city of Z, according to disappeared explorer Percy Fawcett, was hidden somewhere in the jungle of Brazil. But what do you know of the mythical City of Caesars? It's supposed to be a fantastic city that 500 years ago was rich in gold, silver, and diamonds. As South America was slowly being colonized by the Spanish and Portuguese, rumors of the city started to spread. It was allegedly somewhere in Patagonia. Patagonia is one of the most dramatic places on the planet. It has lakes, fjords, rainforests, deserts, penguins, and glaciers. It's a place where you can move from one extreme to the next with no problem. Even today, many parts of Patagonia are untouched by human civilization. It's the perfect place for a secret city to still be hidden. Nobody knows where the myth came from. Some say it was Venetian explorer Sebastian Cabot who first whispered of the City of Caesars. Wherever the rumor came from, once it started to spread, there was no stopping it. All the Spaniards could talk about was a city that had been founded by elite Romans. The legend was that top members of the Senate fled Italy after the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC. The Romans took their families and their slaves and sailed across the Atlantic. When they arrived in Patagonia, they founded a new city and integrated with the locals. It sounds cool, right? The Spanish were already on the hunt for half a dozen mythical cities of gold, but this was the only one said to be Roman. In 1766, a Jesuit missionary took it upon himself to find the city once and for all. Our brave explorer was Father José García Alzue. He went searching for the City of Caesars and found absolutely nothing. The expedition was so boring that there are hardly any records of it today. Slowly, people forgot about the legend. The City of Caesars became little more than a lesser-known version of Atlantis. But that might be changing. Recent technological developments have been shifting the way scientists understand South America. The biggest technological development is LiDAR, a remote sensing method that uses laser pulses to identify ruins hidden beneath overgrowth. If you haven't been watching the channel recently, you're missing out. Be sure to check out some of the recent videos on how LiDAR has discovered lost cities in places like Cambodia and Guatemala. Scientists have found so many hidden cities scattered from Mexico to the Amazon with LiDAR that they've become convinced South America was home to a massive civilization, one that had highways, cities, farms, settlements, pyramids, all the stuff you would expect from the Maya, Aztec, or Inca, only older. Nothing has been found yet, but these new discoveries leave me hopeful that it's only a matter of time before ruins are found in Patagonia. Maybe one of them will be the legendary city of Caesars. Perhaps there will be proof that Romans came to the Americas 2,000 years ago. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. The secret Thracian tomb. One of the greatest archaeological discoveries of this millennium was a Thracian tomb found in Bulgaria. This thing has ties to the old Greek gods, to the Romans, and to the mighty land of Thrace, where Spartacus was born. In 2008, a team of researchers led by Veselin Ignatov from the local Bulgarian museum found a wooden chariot. It was covered in bronze and decorated in images from Thracian mythology. Shortly after, the team discovered a brick tomb that appeared to belong to the man who drove the chariot. He was dressed in a full suit of armor like an ancient warrior. The man was also buried with gold coins, pieces of jewelry, and one very fancy silver cup. The cup has an image of Eros on it, the Greek god of love. The Romans called him Cupid. The practice of burying a nobleman with a chariot was most popular in Thrace. There were a few other regions of the Roman Empire where people buried nobility with their chariots, but nobody did it like the Thracians. They began the practice about 2,500 years ago. You might be wondering who in the world the Thracians even were. They lived wildly in the mountains of the Balkans for about 1,000 years. The Romans saw them as barbarians. They were a loose confederacy of tribes, often warring with one another. But just because the Romans thought they were savages didn't mean that they were. The Thracians had a rich and complex culture, one that's almost entirely been lost, mostly because of Rome. The Romans took over the Thracian territory, leading to a major loss of tradition. The Romans also captured many of their warriors as slaves. Spartacus, the legendary slave who built a rebel army and almost destroyed Rome, was one of those Thracians stolen from his own lands. Spartacus died in 71 BC near Lucania, Italy. It was the end of the gladiatorial war. This amazing tomb remained a secret for 2,000 years. Then, in 2008, it made headlines across the world. But by 2021, interest had waned and the site was abandoned. Tomb raiders pillaged what was left of the site because there was nobody to stop them. Veselin Ignatov told reports that around 150 similar chariots had been stolen by criminals with metal detectors. And all because there aren't enough archaeologists to find the hidden burials first. The haunting Cave of Bones. A flooded sinkhole in southern Mexico is so terrifying that local villagers won't even get near it. They have every right to be terrified. When archaeologists strapped on some diving equipment and swam to the bottom of the hole, they found human bones. There is mounting evidence that even the ancient Maya kept their distance from this underground pit. When I say archaeologists found human bones, I mean they found 2 chambers with their floors utterly covered in bones. The bones seem to have come from dozens, maybe even hundreds of people who may have been sacrificed. The flooded sinkhole is known as a cenote. In most cases, Mexican cenotes are beautiful, paradise-like swimming holes. There are hundreds of them across the Yucatan Peninsula, visited by locals and tourists alike. Most aren't full of dead people, at least not that anyone knows about. It was archaeologist Bradley Russell and his team of researchers who spent 2 weeks diving into the cenote from hell. This was no easy pit to reach either. The team had to rappel 40 feet into a cave that looks like it would make even Batman uncomfortable. Only then could they dive into the cenote, descending into an unbelievably creepy world. The sinkhole is called Saquayum. Its entrance is located not far from the ancient city of Mayapan. 900 years ago, Mayapan was one of the most important cities in the Mayan Empire. Even when other Maya cities were being abandoned, Mayapan remained a major political center. The city was completely encased in a strong outer wall, enclosing about 1.5 square miles of temples and neighborhoods. What's interesting is that the entranceway to Saquayum is outside the city wall. Whoever built the wall curved it in a really awkward way to ensure that Saquayum stayed outside. This is really weird when you consider there are 40 cenotes inside the walls. They were used as sources of fresh water, but not Saquayum. The Maya didn't want this unholy pit inside their borders. But why? What did they fear? And why are there so many skeletons scattered across the sunken chambers? It's a spooky mystery that Bradley Russell is hoping to solve. Bradley said his team found skulls that had been intentionally deformed during infancy. They found skulls belonging to men, women, and children. There seems to be no rhyme or reason to whose body got dumped into the cenote. The strongest theory right now is that the cenote was used for holding plague victims. It could have been used as a watery burial ground for sick people. This would explain why the Maya didn't want the cenote inside their city. Its water would have been considered tainted. Castel Sant'Angelo and the death of the emperor. There is a humongous building in the middle of Rome that is hardly a secret. You can't go to Rome and not see this, even if you're not looking for it. It's a castle towering above the city that's hard to miss. Millions of tourists take photographs of the stunning structure every year, but almost none of them know what they're really looking at. I'm going to let you in on the secrets of one of Rome's oldest castles. It has two names. The Italian name is Castel Sant'Angelo, which means Castle of the Holy Angel, but it's also called the Mausoleum of Hadrian. It was initially built as a tomb for one of the greatest emperors to ever rule Rome, Emperor Hadrian. Why was Hadrian so great? Mostly for his building projects. Hadrian built Hadrian's Wall, marking the northern limit of the Roman province of Britannia. He rebuilt the Pantheon in Rome and the Temple of Venus in Roma. In Egypt, he rebuilt the Serapeum of Alexandria. You couldn't have had a more cultured ruler than Hadrian. He was building and rebuilding every time he turned around. Hadrian is considered one of Rome's 5 good emperors. Seeing as that they had 70 emperors, that's not a bad score. A year after Emperor Hadrian died in the Roman resort town of Baia in 138, his ashes were placed inside the mausoleum. He had commissioned a tomb to be built for himself years before his death. He was buried along with the ashes of his wife Sabina and his adopted son Lucius Aelius. It was meant to be Hadrian's tomb, but the opportunity for an easy grave was just too tempting. Other emperors piggybacked off his success. For the next century, almost every emperor snuck a spot inside Hadrian's tomb. They were uninvited guests, crowding his eternal resting place. In 401, the tomb was converted into a military fortress. It was too little too late, because in 510, King Alaric of the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome. The Visigoths took the urns that contained the ashes of Hadrian, his family, and the other emperors. They scattered the ashes and smashed the urns. They were the rudest uninvited guests of them all. Amazingly, the tomb wasn't even close to being finished with history. In 590, the Archangel Michael supposedly appeared on the roof of the mausoleum to signal the end of the plague that had destroyed Rome. Legend of the angel inspired the popes of Rome to convert the tomb into the castle that still stands today. Construction began in the 14th century. The new castle was connected to St. Peter's Basilica by a fortified corridor known as the Passetto di Borgo. You may have heard of it before. The Passetto di Borgo used to be a legitimate Roman secret. Popes could use the hidden tunnel to escape an attack at the basilica. When Rome was sacked in 1527, Pope Clement fled to the mausoleum of Hadrian. Later, the castle tomb was used as a prison for Benvenuto Cellini when he was charged with murder and embezzlement, and also for the magician Cagliostro and the philosopher Giordano Bruno. Executions were done here until surprisingly recently. The castle wasn't decommissioned until 1901, and now you know the quick 2,000 years of history that make the Castel Sant'Angelo such an amazing monument. The mysterious rock burial of Jersey. There are 2 chapels in Jersey, France that were built over something much older. It's this older thing that you're going to find the most intriguing. One of the chapels is from the 12th century, the other from the 16th. There also used to be a tall tower called the Prince's Tower, but that was torn down in 1924. Anyway, during World War II, the chapels were taken over by the military and used as a lookout point. The thing about the chapels is that they were constructed on a large earthen mound, giving them a great view of the area. The thing is, the mound they were built on is no ordinary hill. It is a prehistoric passage grave from 5,500 years ago. In World War II, an underground command bunker was built inside the grave with complete disregard for the ancient skeletons buried there. The site is called La Hogue Biais. Despite being so heavily altered over the past couple centuries, there is still very little people know about this secretive burial. The grave itself is 62 feet long, built like a crawl space underneath a miniature mountain of dirt, though you most likely don't want to crawl over the graves of the dead. The ancient builders used giant stones to form the passage part, like one really long dolmen. Then they moved many tons of earth to cover the stones, forming the artificial hill. Yes, the passage grave was used for burials, but that wasn't all. It may have also been used for rituals, similar to Stonehenge across the water in England. Each year on the equinoxes, the sun shines directly into the mouth of the passage grave to illuminate it. This would have been quite a spectacle for ancient times. How the grave was built, who built it, and who was buried in it are all unanswered questions. Christians in the Middle Ages tried to erase the mound's history by building chapels on it, so it's actually a miracle there is anything left at all. Thanks for watching! Which lost city do you wish you could find? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and come back soon for more videos from the channel.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Gladiator tunnels. 2,000 years ago, men fought to the death in Rome's great Colosseum. But before the battles, these men had to get themselves ready. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Colosseum was also a training area. Behind the scenes was a gym, a training yard, and an entire underground network beneath the arena floor where the gladiators prepared themselves. Just to get to the fighting floor of the arena, gladiators had to move through these secret tunnels and then take an elevator up. That was when they were finally met by the roaring applause of over 70,000 spectators. Gladiators weren't the only ones who prepared themselves in the underground tunnels either. This was where the wild beasts were kept before they were sent to the fighting floor to be slaughtered. Animal handlers also hung out down here, and slaves worked to prepare weapons and armor. It was nearly as busy underneath the actual floor of the Colosseum as it was on top. The Caves of Longyou. The Longyou Caves in China are considered by some to be the 9th wonder of the ancient world. This place can be found today in the Zhejiang province, a mysterious underground complex of tunnels and rooms that were carved by unknown hands thousands of years ago. What's truly mysterious about these caves is that there are no historical records in China that they ever existed. No one knows who built them, how they pulled off such an amazing task, or why they would do so in the first place. These caves were discovered accidentally in 1992, when farmers drained some nearby ponds. Suddenly, 5 separate caverns appeared along with 19 smaller caves. At first, everyone thought it was a natural wonder, but there are supportive pillars and imprints from tools and carvings. More recent research shows that each cavern has one entrance with a vertical shaft to collect rainwater that would then be directed by a small channel down into a water trap. Whoever dug out the caves had to remove somewhere around 1 million cubic meters of rock. And seeing as this was thousands of years ago, and ancient people didn't have anything more advanced than maybe stone tools and some metal, it seems almost impossible. Archaeologists are working on trying to figure out what technology was used to carve out the underground chambers, some of which are nearly 90 feet in height. It looks like everything could have been done with chisels of different sizes. Pottery found on the ground suggests the caves date back to around 2,000 years ago. Of course, since the ancient civilization here left nothing else behind that we have been able to find yet, some have suggested this could have been a secret Anunnaki construction project from when they visited Earth. A more likely scenario is that it was made by a group of ancient people we just haven't learned about yet. The Longyou Caves are still a huge mystery to scientists. The strangest part by far is that not a single mention of the caves can be found throughout recorded Chinese history. It's like nobody ever knew they existed, and yet the project to build them would have been huge. It would have taken many years and a massive amount of labor to complete. What do you think this place could have been for? An ancient quarry? A ceremonial site? Palace? Storage? Let me know in the comments below. The Cave Castle. Predjama is an underground cave castle hidden at the bottom of a valley in southwest Slovenia. Its entrance is halfway up a vertical cliff face at a height of around 400 feet. But even though it's so high up, it's also incredibly deep down. It was constructed sometime around 1202 by an insane group of builders who managed to tunnel straight through the cliff into a series of caves. The result is something both beautiful, captivating, and a little terrifying. Predjama actually looks quite a bit like Bran Castle or Dracula's Castle in Romania, except that it's hidden deep in the recesses of a dark, dank cave. The most interesting story surrounding Predjama involves the Baron Erasmus von Lug. He was a local hero who robbed the rich and gave to the poor like Robin Hood. But he had to flee to the castle in the 1480s after he killed the marshal of the Imperial Habsburg court. The emperor was so angry that he ordered a siege on the castle, but Erasmus refused to leave. He was able to keep himself secure in the castle by using its network of secret underground tunnels to collect provisions and rainwater. The underground passages allowed him to get 13 miles away to the Vipava Valley to collect fresh fruit like cherries. But finally, after 1 year under siege, Erasmus met his match. It happened when he went to an outhouse on the third-floor terrace. As he was using the outhouse, a cannonball came hurtling through the air and crushed him as he tried to relieve himself. And that was the end of the siege. Creepy New York. There is a secret underground tunnel hiding beneath the New York City streets. It's called the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel, and most New York City residents have no idea they are walking over it during their everyday lives. The tunnel was constructed way back in 1844 by Cornelius Vanderbilt. It was the first attempt in New York at a subway system. But the tunnel was never finished. It was abandoned and workers capped the project off in the 1850s. Rumor goes that a group of Irish immigrants were told they had to work on Sundays by their British contractor, so they killed him and then buried him behind one of the walls. It's possible that the skeleton of that murdered man may still be hiding down there. What's really crazy is that the tunnel was completely forgotten about until the 1980s, over 130 years later. It was only discovered by a man who accidentally went down the wrong manhole and found himself in the abandoned tunnel. The city saw a way to make money from the mysterious underground system by offering tours to curious tourists. But the tunnels closed off pretty quickly after due to safety hazards, and to this day, it remains sealed off and restricted to public eyes. Abandoned Anderson Shelters. All throughout Britain, there are abandoned Anderson shelters from the days of World War II. They have been there for 80 years, mostly collecting dust, and many of them forgotten since their entrances are sealed. The few shelters that are still open are full of bugs, graffiti, foxes, and teenagers up to all kinds of shenanigans. Anderson shelters got their name from Sir John Anderson. He was the British lord in charge of air raid precautions back in 1938. He devised a system of corrugated steel made to form a semicircular dome, and people could install them as shelters underground in the backyard. They were for everyday folk, to protect them from the German air raids and from a potential invasion by the Nazis. England was so worried about the bombs being dropped by Germany that they constructed over 2 million of these shelters in family yards. All these years later, many of them are still there. Londoners use them for storage, to host kids' parties, and some even use them as backyard garden offices. But many are still beneath the earth, covered in overgrown shrubs and dirt, to the point that homeowners don't even know that they're back there. The Secret Martini Bar. One of the palaces belonging to the Queen of England boasts a secret underground tunnel leading to a cocktail bar. At least this is according to Richard Eden, one of the editors for a local British newspaper. He described a conversation he had with Jack Brooksbank, the husband of Princess Eugenie. Jack also happens to work as a brand ambassador for a tequila company. He says there is a tunnel that goes beneath the streets of London all the way from St. James Palace to Duke's Bar. What this means is that the Queen herself, as well as any other member of royalty hanging out at St. James Palace, has a discreet way to travel underneath the city of London to get to the swankiest cocktail bar for 1,000 miles. But this doesn't mean the Queen is actually sneaking out and going there. In fact, no king or queen has lived in the palace since the 19th century, when Queen Victoria moved to Buckingham Palace. Still, St. James Palace is usually filled with royal bureaucrats. These days, it's probably them using the secret tunnel for their after-work drinks, if for no other reason than that they can. Pretty convenient. Secret rooms under Washington Avenue. In St. Louis, danger lurks underneath the sidewalk of Washington Avenue. Derek Langeneckert knows the danger all too well. He was driving his forklift down Washington Avenue during the 2017 Rise Up Beer Festival when all of a sudden the sidewalk collapsed. He and his forklift tumbled into a cavern. Derek had been carrying a load of beer kegs for the festival. When he fell, so did the kegs, blowing up and scattering every which way. Derek himself broke his back from the fall and was stuck in the hospital in terrible agony. He is recovered now, but he almost died. Naturally, Derek sued the city. Throughout his lawsuit, he discovered that the city is actually hiding the fact that there are dozens of hidden rooms all along Washington Ave. The sidewalk is basically a suspension bridge. Even the hole that he fell through is only now covered with plywood and a concrete overlay. It's strong enough for pedestrians, but not for a forklift carrying thousands of pounds of beer. But just what are these secret rooms? They are hidden basements from the 1900s. Shopkeepers had little stores set up down here with glass ceilings to let in natural light. But underground shopping is a thing of the past, and all these basements have been neglected for over 100 years. The decay is real, and Washington Avenue is essentially hollow. It's at constant risk of totally collapsing, swallowing up anyone unfortunate enough to be walking up the street when that happens. Lost nuclear bunker. In the 1950s, everyone was worried about a nuclear bomb being dropped somewhere and destroying everything. The United Kingdom was worried about being attacked by the Soviet Union, and so, similar to the Anderson shelters in the 1930s, the government began to create bunkers. This time, they needed to build reinforced concrete bunkers underground that would survive a nuclear strike. These were significantly more robust than the backyard garden shelters I told you about. One of these bunkers was in the Essex countryside, 3 stories underground. It was linked directly to the Royal Air Force radar defense system to track and intercept any enemy assault. The bunker, which today is a secret tourist destination that most people don't know about, is 125 feet beneath the earth. The only way in is through what appears to be an ordinary bungalow. The bungalow was designed as a secret entrance so that nobody would know there was a nuclear bunker in the otherwise peaceful countryside. But this isn't the only one. Not far from the secret bungalow bunker, there is a railway station that opened in 1865. It was taken over by the official London Underground in 1949. Right around the time that everyone realized nuclear war might be inevitable. It wasn't profitable, and almost nobody used it. And then it closed in 1994, just as the threat of war seemed to dissipate. Many people believe there is a secret underground bunker at the station that the government would have used to whisk people away to safety in the event of an attack. Tunnels under the floor. A man in England was looking through photos of his family's estate when he came across something strange. Freddie Goodall is a 23-year-old property developer who lives in his family's mansion, which happens to be over 500 years old. When he was looking at old pictures of the house, he noticed a doorway he had never seen before in the library. He went to look for himself and realized there was a secret passage hidden behind a bookshelf. There was a door in the picture, but no door any longer. After a bit of fussing to figure out how to get behind the wall, he discovered a secret passageway leading to a set of underground rooms. This is some real Batcave kind of stuff. The tunnel led to a ladder, which descended to a huge room filled with cobwebs and spiders. It was a rabbit hole that continued into an even deeper sub-basement, more secret rooms, and too many secret passageways to count. Now Freddie had no idea any of this stuff existed. He did a bit of research and found out the secret tunnels were probably used by these servants of the estate hundreds of years ago. The tunnels allowed them to move throughout the property without getting in the way of the landlords. Seems like pretty extreme measures to take. Times sure have changed. Staten Island iron mines. Between the 1830s and 1880s, over 300,000 tons of iron ore were mined on Staten Island. This iron ore was refined and used in some of America's earliest iron foundries, but there is almost no evidence left of the enterprise today. Most of the mines are flooded, all of them are abandoned, and the few that weren't filled in are now secret and hidden. One of the most important iron mines anywhere on Staten Island was at Tot Hill. Iron mining began here in the 1600s, with much of the landscape being shaped by the miners coming in and carving out the land to create strip mines. By 1880, open pit mines were being converted into underground mines, and there were horizontal shafts over 100 feet long. German and Irish immigrants making about $1 a day pulled somewhere around 12 tons of iron ore out of the earth every hour. But by 1881, the iron had gone dry. The entire area of Tot Hill had been completely drained, and the mines were abandoned. There is nothing left today except secret shafts hidden underneath neighborhoods where houses cost upwards of $1 million. One of the very last remnants of iron mining can be found on Richmond Road, but it's not a mine shaft. It's an old house built in 1684. David J. Tyson, the man who opened the iron mines on the hill way back when, used it for his personal home. Thanks for watching! Would you spend the night in any of these underground places? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!